everyone. Welcome to another episode of Visual Studio Toolbox, part of our ongoing mini-series all about getting started with .NET MAUI and XAML applications. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson.
And I'm your co-host, Robert Green.
And I'm your presenter, Paul Sheriff.
Yep. We're going to have that whole spiel memorized.
We are.
By the end of it. So this is episode 7. Of our multi-part series. In the last episode, we talked about how easy it is to route from one page to the next in your application. And this time around, we're going to talk about some good old reusability practices when it comes to creating UI. So, Paul, handing the reins to you.
Let's dive in. So, a lot of times we need to have like a header across multiple pages, or maybe we have an address and we need addresses on customers, employees, things like that. So the way we can do that, we can create reusable content. And I'm going to create another folder here. So let's add a new folder. I'm going to call it partial views. Or wait a minute. Nope, I created views partial. That way everything kind of sorts the way I want it. And then we're going to go ahead and add another new item. But instead of doing a content page, I'm going to do a content view. Content views are made to be reused and placed on content pages. I'm going to call this one header view. And we'll go ahead and add this. And then we'll just add a grid where this vertical stack layout is. And if we take a look at this grid, this might look kind of familiar to you. If you remember our user detail, these were the first 3 lines that we built. It has the title, it then has, a kind of a description, and then that box view, if you remember that box view that we had. So all that stuff looks pretty much the same. I have the grid, I have the row definitions, I have the label, I have the box view, where he's still using the grid.rows and column spans and all of that. But I got a little extra little thing now. We haven't talked about data binding yet. But what I want to do is I want to be able to pass in from the main content page the title and the description that I want to display on this reusable header. So I'm going to create a binding down here to what's called the view title and the view description. Now, I put the path equals in there just because a lot of WPF programmers are used to that. In MAUI, we don't use that very often. Okay, so you don't really need to use that. So the question then is, how do I get a view title and a view description on this page that I can bind to? Well, the answer is with what's called bindable properties. And we do this in the code behind. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to add a little bit of code. So let's kind of expand this out a little bit. So I'm adding a public string view title. It's got a typical get and a set. So that part looks familiar. But then we have this thing down here, public static read-only bindable property, and then it's view title property equals bindable property.create. Sorry, did not mean to double click on that. And then view title. So type of string, this is going to be a string value, so I change that. We're on this header view, so we're using that type. And then I give it a default value, which is string.empty. I could, of course, give it whatever I want. But this creates what's called a bindable property. And then since it's on this particular class right here, I can then use it and bind to it here in the XAML once I've done a couple of things. Okay, well, actually, one thing I have to do is set the binding context equal to this class. That's the main thing that we have to do there. Now, if I want to give it some default values, I could actually initialize those here, like so. There we go. So now I've initialized the properties, and I have bound those properties by doing this.binding context equal to this. So that means it contains view title and view description. We're going to be covering more about data binding later on, but I wanted to show you this because it's kind of important for these reusable UIs where you're going to want to be able to pass things in. So let's now go back to our user detail view, because this is the one where I had the two labels that have kind of the title and then the description and the box view. Now, what I want to do is I want to get rid of this, right? So I'm going to get rid of these three. I put one back, so now I only need to remove two of these autos. I only need to remove two rows. Now, what I want to do is I want to use that header view right here. You'll notice it doesn't show up. Okay. The reason why is because it's actually underneath this views partial, so that means it's in a different namespace, right? So you can see the namespace here. So that means I need to reference that namespace. So I have to come up here and do an XML namespace. Okay, and I'm going to call it partial. I'm going to do adventureworks.views.maui.views partial. There we go. And now I can do partial. There it is. Look at that. Header view. So if I hit tab, okay, now I can do grid.row is equal to 0. Okay, grid.column span is 2. And then look at this. There they are. There's those two properties. Because I define them in the code, right, it gives them to me as properties. So I can set the view title to user information, and I can set the view description equal to use this screen to modify user information. So whatever kind of description of this I want. Okay, and then we'll close that tag. And there we go. So now, the only thing I have to do is I actually have to, since this is grid row 0, I now need to renumber these, unfortunately. I haven't found a way to renumber these in WPF. It was really easy. You can do it through the editor. Here in .NET MAUI, at least so far, I haven't found a way to do it. I'm hoping they're going to add this. Make sure, no, that should have been 5, sorry. Hopefully they're going to add it in the next version where they'll have some mechanism for us to do this. All right, so now I should have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for all of these. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that right? Yeah, 6. There we go. All right, so if I've done everything correctly, right, should be able to run it, and we should still see everything like it did before. And maybe it's might look a little different just because I think I changed a couple of things there. But this is one way that we now have a reusable piece that I can now take and I can put it on the other pages as well, right? So if we go here to the users and we navigate to that detail, there it is. Now I've centered it. Okay, the box view is going across that way. So it looks a little different, but it's still the same information. So now all I got to do is do the same thing over here on each of these others, right? So if I go to the product detail view, I'd have to do the same thing, XML namespace, partial. And now it's not going to give me the IntelliSense because I got to stop. Always got to stop. Stop and search. But obviously it makes sense, right? I mean, we can't do everything. So, all right, let's go ahead and do this one. So I'm going to add a lot more stuff, though, under the product detail here. Take all this out, and look at this. I'm going to give us a nice big, lots of labels and entries, and then there is our reusable header view again. But I changed the view title and the view description. Okay, so that's kind of nice. Let's do one more. Let's do our login view. So again, I would do the XML namespace, partial, works.views, partial. That's the one. Great. Make sure you get the right one. There are a lot of namespaces that will come up there. All right, and then let's go ahead and change this guy here as well. So it looks more like a login page, but again, using our reusable code. And we'll build a couple more of these as we go throughout this series here. Let's go ahead and try this out and make sure they're all working up to this point. But you can see the power of this, right? There's reusability. So there's our product information screen, and now you can see I've got a lot more here. I didn't do anything on customers. I did login. So there's our login screen. And, of course, our detail screen. So we're reusing that code instead of duplicating it.
Awesome. Very nice.
Now, like I said, I mean, there's a lot of things that I think you'll find that you can do with this. Like I said, like you'll have addresses for everybody, right? Customers, employees, whatever. So that might be a great reusable thing. I think we're going to build that one coming up as well. I think you're going to find a whole series of things that you do with this. Use it for help, for instance. That might be another thing you do. Put a little help button on every page, and that help button and all the code behind can be consolidated into that one place too, right? So
yeah, you can do your OK cancel, your save cancel. You can do small things. You can do large things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So a really good use, I think, is to keep trying to use these reusable, widgets, if you want to call them. And again, the key here, I like keeping them separated into a separate folder. That may be just me, I don't know, but I personally like them, so I know which ones are the reusable ones, which ones aren't. So I'm really big on keeping my folder structure nice and separated. Okay. And when you're doing the add new item, make sure you're using the ContentView XAML, all right, as opposed to the content page. The content page is for a whole new page that you want to develop. The ContentViews are the ones that you wish to reuse over and over again.
Cool. So this is kind of like, if you're familiar with Blazor applications, having different components that you can define and then reuse across whatever pages you're interested in the web app context.
Absolutely. And in what is it, MVC, you'd have the little partial guys that you bring in. It's a partial tag. And in WPF, it's a user control, right? And we had those in Windows forms too, if you remember back then. So, So we've always had this concept of reusability. You just have to take advantage of it and make sure you're really thinking ahead to, can I use this again? Don't go overboard with them, but really think about, and you might start building a couple of pages and realize, oh, wait a minute, those things if you're copy and pasting from one place to another, stop yourself, right? And refactor, just like you would do with C# or any, VB, doesn't matter what you're writing. If you find yourself copy and pasting, stop and refactor, put it into something that's reusable. So it's the same thing with UI, I think. All right.
What's up next?
Well, next we're going to start looking at some borders and frames. And we're going to use that in a couple of places. Plus, we're going to build that reusable address control as well.
Good stuff.
Cool.
All right. So tune in, and then till then, happy coding.